We good? We're good.
Sure.
Okay. Welcome to the MSAD 51 Board of Directors meeting for Monday, February 6, 2023. I'll call the meeting to order, and we have our students here, and we're missing Mike and Leanne currently. Is that right? We must be missing somebody else.
I think Mike's coming though. Tom.
Tom. All right, we're missing Mike and Tom and Leanne currently. Leanne's definitely not coming. Okay, moving on. So, first item of business is recognition, and I believe Corey is here for that.
Good evening, everybody. So I have 3 minutes or less, but I do have a few prepared remarks to share about Linda McCann Olson, who I am here to recognize tonight. So MIW visual art instructor Linda McCann Olson is a longtime member of the Greeley community. I didn't know this, but she actually attended kindergarten in the Little Red Schoolhouse, which is now the superintendent's office. She then graduated from Greeley High School, and I believe she has 29 years of teaching experience. So she has seen many, many things, which is fantastic. But through it all, she is a great example of someone who's always looking to learn new things and different ways to engage her students. A centerpiece of her programming has been units that have been inspired by East Asian art. She's created many lessons and activities that are inspired by the art and culture of China, Japan, and Korea. In 2019, she was invited to Aomori, Japan, which is Maine's sister state, on a cultural exchange to learn about their annual printmaking project in their elementary schools. She visited classrooms, galleries, museums, and worked with artists in their studios. Following the successful trip, she has now developed and directed an exchange of student prints between elementary artists in Maine as well as Japan. The exchange is called Hashi, which translated in Japanese means bridges. You may have noticed this fall the stunning black and white prints on display in the GCA. The exhibition was composed of 106 student prints from both Japan and 80 prints created by MIW students. Linda collected student prints from around the state to send a collection of Maine prints to Japan for their March exhibition. Of the prints that she shipped overseas, 63 of them were from MIW students, which is pretty awesome. The exchange of artwork is an important act of cultural diplomacy that encourages building relationships and peaceful understanding across cultures. And this September, we will be hosting the Hashi Maine 2023. So Linda's, again, she's a great example of somebody who continues to learn and think of creative ways to engage our students. And this partnership with Japan is pretty amazing. And the pictures that she brought back with her are definitely something that you should check out when you get a chance. So thank you, Linda.
And does Linda want to speak? No?
Thank you, everyone, for making that possible, and always very
Thank you.
So where's the best place to see the prints on the website?
So the prints will have another show in the fall, which will be prints that our students will create this spring, and then prints that they're creating in Japan now. And our prints are now in Japan for their March show. So, but we do have photos, and I will post. I'll post a show so you can have a sampling.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you, Corey. Jeff, could you speak a little bit about our facilities team and our bus drivers this past week?
Yes, I'd be happy to. This past week has obviously been a really challenging week weather-wise. And when the weather gets bad, everybody obviously has challenges with that. But two departments in our district that are especially challenged are the transportation and the facilities departments during weather-related events. And we also had some other things going on with our transportation department as well, with illness, and we had 7 people out from our fleet, and bus drivers are very challenging to find in terms of substitutes. But we were able to make that work over the last week. We had several days where we did not have enough drivers for our regular runs, and I'd like to really thank our directors at the Transportation Garage, Phil Blake and Rachel Swenson, for stepping up to the plate and making sure that all of our runs were covered. We had obviously some new folks that were driving our runs, and we want to thank them for stepping in. We had coaches that were driving for us who had their CDL license and were able to step up in the last minute and take on a bus run. But really, I don't think very many people even knew that we had issues. It was so seamless for the most part. So I want to thank our transportation department, all of our drivers, for just hanging in there with multiple vacancies. When we have 7 drivers out of our driving crew, that really is a huge problem, because only so many people have a license to drive a school bus in our district. So it's a huge challenge. In terms of our maintenance department, we obviously, with the cold weather over the weekend, our facilities department, several members of our facilities crew were walking the facilities night and day because of the very cold weather, making sure that none of our buildings lost heat or lost a pipe. And I want to thank Dawn Foster, who's the facilities supervisor, for discovering at Mabel I. Wilson School that the modular units, the gas line, basically the valve broke, so we did not have gas that was flowing and no heat in those in any of the modular units. And as a result, we had to call the gas company to come over. Dawn called them, was there for many hours, well into the overnight this weekend with the gas company, trying to repair that line on Saturday evening, as it was just 40 below wind chills. So I want to thank Summit Natural Gas. I want to thank Dawn Foster, especially Carl Rowe, and all of the facilities crew members who helped to walk the facilities, make sure that pipes weren't bursting, and really keep on top of all that, on top of many times over the last 3 weeks, plowing, shoveling, many long nights to making sure that we're ready for school. So just want to really call out both those departments. We have so many hardworking people in our school district, staff members, and just can recognize everybody for everything they do. But this past week has been particularly stressful for the transportation and facilities departments. And so thank you to both of them. And I'd like to thank Scott as well, as Director of Operations, who oversees all of that, and make sure that everything is running smoothly, and get lots of phone calls from Scott over the weekend updating on what is going on in our facilities. So thank them both.
Jason, could I just add something to that?
Please do.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add is that Dawn Foster runs a bus driver class. We're one of the only certified training areas around where we're allowed to do our own training. We currently have about 11 drivers in that. And the only reason we were able to cover most of this the last time around in this past couple of weeks was that Dawn had run a bus driver class, which encouraged a lot of our coaches to take that class. So, for instance, people such as Mark Willett, Emily Cartwright, and John Lane were all drivers that helped us out, who coach for us and do other work. So, so we couldn't have done it without them. So,
Thank you, everybody, for stepping up. And, Dawn and our facilities team and our transportation department. Thank you to the parents for being patient with missed school bus runs and everything. Moving on to more thank yous, I wanted to mention that the board went back to school this past week in 2 of the buildings, in both the middle school age groups, and I want to thank the teachers and the staff, and just it is wonderful to go into the classrooms and see just the teachers, just how well prepared they are. It's like a orchestrated performance. It's just wonderful to see. And then to see the kids engaging and just the back and forth, and the kids are happy. It was wonderful to see. And Jeff's going to kill me, but I think parents go back to school would be a wonderful thing sometime if we could swing it somehow. It would help everybody understand how great our staff is on a daily basis. Okay, moving on. Approval of minutes. Without objection, I'm going to kick this to the next meeting because there's some things that we want to update, some seconds that are missing and stuff. No big deal, but I'm going to table that for now. And so we'll move on to public comment. Please, if you'd like to speak, step up, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Kelly Kite. I am an ESP at the Mabel I. Wilson School. We know that there has not been an opportunity for the mediation teams to meet since December 14th, and we know that that has been unavoidable. I'm here tonight to remind you that we're still here. We're still working without a contract, supporting your amazing children every day in every aspect of their day. We are hopeful that our ESP secretary contract can be resolved soon and that we will be making a living wage so that we can continue to do the job that we so much love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ingrid Vanny. I have been working in the district as an EdTech 3 for the past 7 years. Last year as a 5th grade teacher, as one of the additional 5th grade teachers. So we had smaller class sizes to make up for COVID. I've also had kids in the district for the past 12 years. I just wanted to share a conversation with you that I had recently with a friend. This friend from a different district was a paraprofessional for the past few years, but didn't continue her role this year, even with a contractual pay raise, as it was not enough to provide what she needed for her family. So she found a higher paying job to do that. I was updating her on our current situation, sharing the fact that we were still working more than halfway through this school year now, without a contract, and subsequently without a pay increase since the beginning of the 2021 school year. We are diligently and loyally still showing up, as Kelly mentioned, every day, doing our jobs and going above and beyond to help the district cover openings that continue to go unfilled. And the response from the district for that is we still don't have a contract. My friend went on to share with me that her son, a sophomore in high school, 15 years old, recently got a job as a dishwasher at a local restaurant and is making $18 an hour. And when he walked in a few minutes later, his dad, who had been part of the conversation, jokingly said, "Hey, guess what? You make just about as much as Mrs. Vanny." The problem is, this isn't a joke. This is every ESP's current reality, which accounts for around 100 employees in the MSAD 51 district. And it has been our reality now for the past 8 months since our contract ended and a new one has not been agreed upon. I want you just for a moment to put yourself in our shoes and see if you can understand how it must feel knowing that we are in the same hourly pay range as roles such as dishwashers, not that they're not needed, and other jobs that those without high school degrees can perform. To become an EdTech 3, we not only have to have a high school degree, but we need 90 college credit hours, which is equivalent to 3 years of a higher education. There's a little bit of a difference there. I want you to think about how that equates to the perception we are supposed to have in viewing what this district thinks about its ESPs. Just take a second. Can you feel how we might be feeling at this point? I hope you can at least a little. Feel the frustration, the disappointment, not feeling very valued. And I challenge you to tell me that you wouldn't feel the same way if you were in our position. Again, around 100 employees in this district. And when our neighboring towns are offering higher, more competitive wages, Do you think that prospective employees are going to apply to our district's open positions so we're able to hire those that are best qualified? I don't think so right now. And do you think that some of the employees working here may consider applying to do the same work next door to be paid more fairly, or even leave education, as my friend did, to find a higher paying job to meet their family's needs? It's very possible. If this district wants to remain a top district in this state, it needs to be able to attract and retain highly qualified professionals. And in order to do that, this district needs to do the right thing and provide a fair contract with a competitive market wage for its ESPs. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others that would like to speak? Okay. No other public comment on any other topic? Okay. As you know, as you mentioned, we haven't had a meeting since, well, for a while, by no fault of anybody's, and we'll be meeting on the EdTech contract very soon, and we all very much want to get it resolved. So I appreciate your comments, appreciate you being here. Moving on to presentations. Jeff, please.
Oh, okay, we are. I can avoid that.
We will only present the budget.
All right, sit over there.
All right, good evening. Scott Poulin, I was Director of Operations and Finance. Myself will be co-presenting the short-term facilities plan, and be getting into a lot of the details of this plan this evening, and explain why we are presenting this plan and some of the possible solutions that we're bringing to the board tonight in order to do this. So the agenda for this presentation tonight is to look at the board-adopted long-range capital plan just briefly, just to remind everyone that there is one. Short-term facilities plan, this is our proposed plan for the board to consider for Mabel A. Wilson School and Greeley Middle School. The cost of this plan and Mabel A. Wilson School's revolving renovation project update. We'll just update you quickly on that. So the short-term plan that we're presenting tonight is obviously linked back to the strategic plan, which goes back to 2018, which the board approved at that time, and that this board has been extending since we were getting out of the pandemic, and we're not in a position to start a new strategic plan. This one has been extended. And the priority is to review the district's long-term elementary education program and structure, including options for pre-kindergarten, optimal grade spans, and facilities that address projected enrollment increases over the next decade. So everything we're talking about and have been talking about in terms of a new primary school in this district that went to referendum in November is all tied back to the strategic plan. So I won't go through this. This is your long-range major capital plan. There were different priority levels in this plan. This was approved by the Board of Directors back in May of 2022. And you can see priority 1 is in green, which is building a new primary school. This will need to be updated, obviously now, given the vote in November. And then along with that, improving the Mabel I. Wilson School, which was also part of that proposed bond back in November, will need to be updated. And just a reminder that there were 2 other priorities in here, 2 and 3, including an artificial turf field, renovating maintenance in the field house, and renovating Greeley High School in a number of areas. Weren't tied to the bond that went out, obviously, in November, but were things that we had put before the board for approval and were approved as part of the long-range plan over a period of time. So just reminding you that that plan will need to be updated. Why are we in need of a new plan? And this is a plan for the short-term facility needs for the next 5 years. Obviously, we had a referendum vote in November 2022 that did not pass, which requires us now to come up with a contingency plan for our students and staff for the next 5 years. And I say 5 years for a reason. If the board were to choose to go out to referendum, I assume it wouldn't be within the next year. But if it wasn't within the next year or so, it would take a year of planning. It would take another 2 to 3 years of construction. So that's why we arrived at the 5-year mark and needing to make sure that we have a short-term plan for at least the next 5 years. And then again, obviously tied to this very closely is the long-range plan, and simultaneously, what is the board going to do in the long term? And those discussions, as you know, will be starting next Monday evening to talk about what is the long-term plan. So they're really running two different things simultaneously: the short-term plan for 5 years, and then what is the long-term plan for looking again at a new school for the district. So enrollment studies, again, some of these things are just reminders for everyone that we've had 3 different enrollment studies since 2016. 2016, 19, and 2022. Actually, it was March of 2022, about a year ago. All 3 recent studies concluded and debunked the 2009. There were 2 studies back then that showed that the district would be declining over a period of time, and obviously that did not happen. And actually the reverse has been happening for a number of years, and we'll be showing you a little bit more information about that in a moment. And this is a line that the demographer who worked with us on all 3 of these studies has said repeatedly, either publicly and to me as well, saying that this district is a 4-facility district, has been and always will be, and that the district has to prepare for the ups and downs of enrollment and having 4 functioning facilities in our district to serve the students here. And in the interim, we obviously will need a plan, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight, is the next 5 years. So we are proposing that phase 1 would be focusing on Mabel I. Wilson School first. We consider the Mabel Wilson School facility to be most in need of immediate attention. We have obviously given attention to MIW and GMS over the years with modulars, but in terms of taking the modulars that are existing, reconfiguring them now for a longer period of time, we were waiting for the referendum to see what was going to happen, but we now know we've got another 5 years of waiting at least that we need to be prepared for. And Mabel Wilson School exceeded its capacity back in 2015. So it's been 8 years that the 550 student mark, which was back in 2015, was exceeded, first exceeded, so 8 years. The current enrollment is up 225 students since that time. So over the last 8 years, that school has gained 225 students consistently. The main building has undergone, at the beginning of that phase, we weren't sure if this was a bubble or if this was a consistent increase in enrollment. And Mr. Poulin and facility staff, Don Foster, and we had contractors come in and did a lot of work inside the building to try to make space within the Mabel I. Wilson School building at that time, and quickly realized that this was becoming a trend and we were running out of space in the main building early on. And that's when we started resorting to modular units, which we've had since 2016 on the grounds. The main building is cramped, as many of you will find out if you come to the board. It goes back to school tomorrow at Mabel I. Wilson School. You'll see cramped spaces in that building. You'll see many modular units. There are 14 modular rooms on the grounds right now, with more needed. We do not have enough space at that school, adequate space for allied arts, special education, response to intervention, which is interventions in literacy math for students, gifted and talented, small group work. We don't have conference space. Cafeteria is too small for the number of students we have in the school. The gym is too small as well. When there's assemblies, the students have to be split into half in order to get into the gym for an assembly. So we have a lot of constraints there. And there's a lot of others that I haven't. One example is that we have 8 staff members right now working out of one classroom where they are providing interventions to students, and that's also their home base. They go into classrooms as well during the day. But that's the kind of situation that we're dealing with right now. The modulars have been encroaching on play space more and more every single year over the 8 years, and we've had more and more kids. So we've had more students using the play space, and we've had less and less space for them to be using. This is, I think, a good illustration of just where our cutoff point is in terms of our capacity in the main building at Mabel I. Wilson School and the actual enrollment. And the red line that you see is the 550 student capacity at the Wilson School. And you'll see back in 2014, there were 537 students attending that school. And that was at the lowest point. And that was, again, part of that, those 2009 studies that showed that the school was declining in enrollment. And that occurred slightly up to 2014. And then you'll see that it started to change around 2014 into 15. And you'll obviously see the blue line shows the enrollment increases since then. The arrow is showing where we are today. In 2022-23, 763 students in the school. So you can see that's more than 200 students increase in that building. And next year we're projecting 779 students will be at the Mabel I. Wilson School. The enrollment begins to level off from there, but will slowly, incrementally increase, and we'll be at 822 students in 2028-29. So you can see it's well above the capacity of that facility to be able to handle that enrollment. Thus, we've had all the modular units being put in. But we have patched those modular units in over a period of years. And part of our plan is to talk about how are we going to manage this for the next several years so that it is more optimal and it allows the main building to start breathing. We've got a lot of students in very small places. We've got to start thinking differently, as well as manage the continuing enrollment growth to 822 students. So Scott is going to come up and talk in detail about what this plan looks like.
I may have to do some finger pointing here to explain this tonight, okay, to go through it. But the current modulars that exist on that site, the 10-room cluster is located about here, and then there's 2 modulars that are located in these 2 spaces right now. So what we're proposing is removing these 2 modulars, taking the 10-room cluster that currently exists here, turning it sideways along the building here. So it would literally take over Tuttletown, and it would overlap this area. And what we would end up doing at that point is moving this 12-room cluster in, which would come down into the infield space on the ball field. What would then happen is we would propose the building of a new playground right down in about this area, which is where the other side of the modular would be in the other side of that ball field. And so we'd be relocating Tuttletown or relocating the playground to this area. Whatever pieces of equipment we can salvage, we will. Other pieces of equipment we're going to have to buy new. The other thing that we'd be looking at doing here is repaving this area. We'll be able to reclaim a lot of this blacktop area in the building and outside the building, which is where the kids are on the hard play surfaces. And what we propose is doing, the painting of the 4 square lines, or whatever, goes along with that. The other piece that we're looking at with this is that over here we would propose, this is where the pre-K area is, we propose a small playground here for the pre-K students so that they could access this area. So in essence what we're doing is we're taking away these 4 classrooms, we're adding another 12-room unit, so the net effect I believe is 8 new classrooms by adding this 12 unit. These would have bathrooms in them, full security systems, and then we'd be talking about how we fence this area and how we set that all up and access it. So, so that's really what we're proposing right now.
And that would be this summer, right?
That would happen this summer in phase 1. We'd be dealing with Mabel I. Wilson School. So we gain playground, more space, and the pre-K space, and then the paved area, and try to give a little bit of more breathing room within the building.
Could you read the numbers, the existing and proposed playground play area space? It says square feet.
The square footage number, hang on, let me just take a look at that. So basically, existing tunnel ground is about 20,000 square feet. So we'd be able to put 30,000 square feet down here. Sure.
And the pre-K area says 700 square feet?
Yeah, there's a small area that, it used to be here, actually, I think, you folks will remember it quite well. There used to be, when we ran a before and after care program in here, there was a small playground area that was right out in this space. So what we propose is, it's kind of right out the door of the pre-K area, we propose putting in a small playground there. All right, so that's what we're proposing at this point.
Scott, did you mention fence?
Oh, I didn't mention that, no. This fence line that runs around the ball field, what we do is push that fence line out so it's out to here. And so what we gain is we gain more of that outfield space when we did that. So, and try to gain that. I mean, there's a little bit of there's a fire hydrant ridge over here, but we can literally push that out a little bit. So you'd have playground space, and then you'd have all of this open space to play, plus we gain the hard space. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that part.
Do you want to take questions at this point on this phase and then move on, or how do you want? Yeah.
I think it makes sense.
From the board.
Yeah.
Are they gonna still be able to walk on that sidewalk? We're not getting rid of that sidewalk.
Which sidewalk? This is out through here?
No, down at the bottom.
To the right of the 12
Down at the bottom
unit?
by the road, yeah, where the
Oh,
field
no,
is.
the sidewalk still remains.
Okay,
Yeah, the sidewalk will still remain, and we're hoping staff will still have parking space here, and what we're gonna end up is just moving the gate so that staff can still come into the modulars.
are we gonna propose trying to cut off that connector, or is that still not doable?
No, that's not in the cards right
Okay.
now for that. The connector road, I think, would create a difficult situation for us with bus traffic, parent traffic, and the whole design of that connector road.
Yeah,
And Jeff and I have had a lot of conversations about this. The whole design of that connector road was to unload the traffic off of Main Street, and anybody coming down into the campus could get to anywhere they needed to go on the campus between the buildings. And I think you'd have one heck of a bottleneck if you eliminated that.
and, I know there has been some distractions with the modulars where they're placed right now with the school children outside. That bottom one, MIW 12, I think, yeah, yep, the bottom one. Is that gonna be situated so it's not like a classroom window that's so close to the kids playing and balls hitting? Like, I just wanna know if that's gonna be like a walk
And
ramp.
We actually talked about with Tuttletown moving out here, you don't have them right next to the windows. Now, there still may be some hard space out here,
Yeah,
but and I think it's just unavoidable. And what we'd end up doing, though, is trying to put, as the educational technicians know out on the playground, kids tend to get underneath these because balls go through.
Yeah.
They break out the skirting underneath the modulars. So we'll put some kind of fencing along there and something here to keep students from, balls going underneath or whatever, so.
Scott, do all of the classrooms, will they all have windows?
Yes. Yeah, they all have windows now. In the 10-room cluster, they have them in the 12-room cluster. They literally come, when they're delivered, they literally come like, this 12-room cluster would come in 6 sections. So, and they come from down south, North Carolina, I believe it is, and they literally are trucked up on site. So what you'll see this summer is you'll see all of these taken apart, sitting in the parking lot until they're moved, and then you'll see 6 of these units sitting in the parking lot until we can prep all the site and get most of the site ready, because we've also got to put concrete pads underneath these. It's going to be pretty extensive, running water and sewer and some of the other things that we need, especially over to where this one's been moved, this 10-room cluster. I think most everything we've already done will help out here, because water and sewer already exist and a lot of the electricity, and utilities, but over here we'll have to run some more, do some more site work.
and who helped us design this? I forget.
This was Stephen Blatt Architects. I've worked with them for a number of years.
Okay,
On a lot of these projects.
all right.
Pat Carroll, who works with them, is he's basically their landscape individual, and, Steve Blatt, quite frankly, I rely on him a lot for a lot of these things, and exterior things around campus.
Thank you.
Under this proposal, do we know what classes are where as far as grade levels?
We don't have that information yet. We'll be working on that.
Is that something that's gonna be part of before anything goes forward as far as we're knowing that,
I
right?
think we
Jason.
got the board that we're
Yeah,
talking.
well,
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll open it up. I'll open it up for more questions after the presentation, if you like, sure. Yep.
I was just curious because I thought in past conversation we had talked about maybe having the portables down on that on the edge of the outfield. So I'm just curious what led to this configuration.
Gonna fit. When we started laying things out, it wasn't gonna fit in through here with the 12 room and the 10 room. And then the other idea was to try and keep the modulars as close to the building as we could for security reasons. They have to be 20 feet off the building. But when you start putting modulars down here, they become more and more, the students and the staff become more and more disconnected from the actual building itself. So trying to keep them around in that area makes a lot of sense.
As far as ball field, just run rampant for 10 full minutes and get out all your energy kind of space. Will teachers be able to access the middle school ball field during the day at all? I mean, obviously we're not going to have kids going over there during recess, but what kind of just open space will there be?
Uses that space across the access road a lot. I know MIW is used on occasion, but I believe, if you can correct me, guys, I believe right now, a lot of times we go across the street and we go up into the track and the field that's within the track to do, you know, more space in that area.
Okay.
And we are going from 20,000 to 30,000 square feet. So we're losing our ball field, but that's an improvement.
And thank you for all the work that went into this. Just, I mean, this is a lot of problem solving, so thank you for this.
And then the staff, because people always ask what will staff have for input. There's a playground committee that's been coordinated at Mabel I. Wilson School, and so they'll be able to work with their administration there, Corey and Mallory, and they'll be able to talk about playground equipment, some of the structures and some of the things for the playground that are doable. So.
That was the only last thing that I wanted to add is that I would hope that any new equipment that we ordered, you know, that we could make sure that it's accessible for all of our students.
So I'm actually pretty excited about the playground reconfiguration. It sounds pretty significant. I would imagine that the playground is going to be offline for the entirety of the summer, right?
This playground out here will be offline, I would imagine, yeah. We won't have total down for the summer.
Okay. With the expectation that the new one would be ready by the start of school?
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, it'll probably be ready even sooner than that, because we have to get that one and all of this work done before we can do this up here, so. Would be my guess, there'll be some pieces that have moved, so. But yes, the intent is to have it ready for the start of the school year. It's a lot of work going on this summer.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a busy summer again. We've had some busy summers, but this one's, I think, gonna be a kicker for us.
Scott, the walkways, I know it was mentioned at the middle school they were going to be covered to the portables. Will these walkways be covered?
Yeah, these are the, don't pay a lot of attention to the way these are laid out, but these are the ramps and they have to meet a certain ADA or handicap accessibility. But what we're looking at doing is covering over these ramps so we won't have all the snow and the slippage on them. So we're looking to either enclose them completely or just roof them. So each one of these ramps that come out on each end.
Other questions from the board, comments? Okay. Do we want to move to year 2 and beyond?
So not the most ideal situation, but I think the best use of space at Mabel I. Wilson School, and in being able to provide this for the next 5 years, at least, in terms of waiting for a new school. We think this is the best plan we've got. So I want to thank Scott and Stephen Blatt, architects, for all their work on this. This is a lot to really look at what we can actually do. Wilson, because of the 8 years that we have been doing all kinds of different reconfigurations of space, felt that it was the most compelling to make sure that we address the Wilson space issues first, and that was phase 1. So phase 2 would be Greeley Middle School, which would be the summer of 2024. So about 18 months from now. And the middle school is on the verge or cusp of some very significant enrollment gains, but they're not quite there. We're right there on the verge. We've had some outgrowth over the last couple of years. They outgrew their program capacity, not their architectural capacity, which is 795 is the architectural capacity for Greeley Middle School 4.8. But the program capacity is about 750 is our estimate. And that's because of all the new programming that has come online over the last 18 years since the building was built. There's been a steady rise in enrollment that will be that's projected starting in 2024-25. We've seen a little bit of incremental enrollment shifts over the last couple of years, but we're about to start in on a large shift. Projected enrollment is expected to rise by 213 students before 2028-29. If you think about the enrollment growth at Mabel I. Wilson School since 2015, that pretty much mirrors that full extent of that enrollment coming through now and being steady. We're seeing a steady enrollment increase, and then it stays. It's not something that we see the increase and then it drops. This is steady enrollment increase going all the way through. The main building is starting to become very cramped, as well as the Wilson School was, and it is beginning already to not be conducive to today's programming. Currently, we have 6 modular rooms helping out outside the main building. We have world languages out there right now. So phase 2 in the summer of 2024, we would remove those 6 rooms, those singular rooms, and replace it with a 10 or 12 classroom building, just like we would at Mabel I. Wilson School. And then I will say this, depending on what the board's long-term plan is, and I know that you begin those discussions next week, by the summer of 2026, going into the school year 26-27, we have another large enrollment increase that we're going to have to pay attention to. So, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So here's the enrollment for Greeley Middle School 4-8. So this is the entire facility. We have 2 schools, obviously, in that building. And you'll see that right now we're at 795 students at the school 4-8. And that enrollment has been relatively flat since 2011. We had a little increase right in 2013-14, but it has remained at the 800 mark, just under 800 student mark for quite a while. And you'll see the program capacity mark is about 750, again, for capacity. So we've been just a little bit over, and because we knew the enrollment was coming, we started acting on that a couple of years ago, realizing that we can't keep up with the programming that we've got in the school without making those additional modular adjustments, which we did 2 years ago. So you'll see the enrollment, much like Wilson did. The middle school will be going through a similar period, starting really by 2024. It will go up a little bit more next year, and then 2024-25, there will be a large and steep increase for a couple of years, up to 922 students pretty quickly. So within a 2-year period of time, we'll go from around 800 students to 922 students. And these are all projected numbers based on enrollment reports, but if you look at our numbers that we already have in our school district right now, that makes sense. And then by 2028-29, there will be 1,008 students at Greeley Middle School, so there'll be another, about 100 students after that first initial increase, will be another one. And again, that mirrors all the student enrollment that we've got coming through, plus the projections that we were given. So we know that this is something we need to pay attention to. And depending on what the board chooses to do long term, will impact whether another second unit of 10 or 12 rooms needs to be put in at Greeley Middle School somewhere around 2026-27. If there is a decision to go out to referendum and bond and start moving that process quicker, we'd have to look at how many units we'd have to actually put there in 2026-27. But right now, based on what's there, that's something we'll have to monitor very carefully. So Scott's going to again talk about the Greeley Middle School plan, but just keep in mind this is phase 2, and this would not be, we're not proposing that this work occurs until the summer of 2024. In other words, we're leaving the 6 rooms we've got at the middle school for 1 more year and then addressing the middle school in a year.
Thank you, Jeff. I was told that they couldn't hear me at home, so I'll grab this long mic to talk into. So the proposal at Greeley Middle School is currently 3 modular classrooms, or 3 modular buildings representing 6 classrooms behind Greeley Middle School. One located here, 20 feet apart, another one here, and then another one here. So what we're proposing is removing those 3 buildings, not this summer, but the following summer, and then putting in a 12-room cluster, much like you saw at Mabel I. Wilson School. The current modulars at Greeley Middle School do not have bathrooms in them, and so that's created a problem for us in terms of, students needing to go in and out of the actual large building. Limits the grade levels that we can put in this building in terms of, if it was 4-5 or whether 6-8, and so. So what we're proposing also is running water and sewer to that location, which would have to come from this side of the building and come around. So we literally trench. On top of that, the modulars, which I didn't mention earlier, all of the modulars by fire code now have to be sprinkled. So we'd have to run sprinkler lines into the building and sprinkle the building as well. We'd also bring out, all of the utilities, and so this unit would encroach on the infield of the existing softball field. And if you know where this is the walkway that runs from the middle school up to the hill, kind of goes up to the top where the field house is. And so that's what we'd be proposing in the second year. I think that's about it for the middle school, if anybody has any questions. What it does do is it does preserve the field space for play area and for rec, so it does preserve that. If we do have to add a second one, I'm afraid that it would probably encroach over here and take some of this field space. Okay.
Scott, so the reason for waiting till summer of '24 is just going back to Jeff's projection of number of students. Basically, we can get by for another year.
Correct.
And then it starts
we can stagger this over a few years in order to make that happen. Any other questions on the middle school?
In the interim, the current modulars, are we able to put some coverings over the ramps?
Be quite a bit of construction to do that. We could, if we wanted to. I think it would be, I would prefer not doing it because I think it would be just resources wasted when we're just waiting one more year. I think we could continue to, try to keep those clean.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. All right, any other questions on that? Do I need to go back to Mabel I. Wilson because they couldn't hear me at home, or should I just continue? Okay. Do you want to click us back through? Okay, and I'll just touch on that and just do a real quick summary. I think we need a handheld mic, Ryan.
It's like a 1950s talk show host.
Oh, it's like
Bob Barker.
No, it's like pretty crazy. So just to summarize again, we're looking at moving the 10-room cluster that is where this M12 is now, turning it sideways against the building, which would basically move the 10-room cluster here, add a new 12-room cluster in its place. We would be displacing the Tuttletown, but we'd also be building a new playground down in this area of the ball field. This modular comes down a little bit to impact the infield area. We end up with all of this play space that's available. We'll move the fence out so that we gain this outfield area. We're actually going to put a skinny mix over the top of this so that we do some pavement here and regain this hard space for play area. And then we'll also add a pre-K area, pre-K playground area right outside the door from the pre-K room. So in essence, what happens is we are adding, by removing these 2 modulars that exist now, we'll literally be adding 8 classrooms when you net everything out. So that's it.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, so areas this plan does not address, we will continue with the modular setup in this plan. Common space, as we mentioned earlier, gym, cafeteria, we're not able to address those areas. We're just addressing instructional space. We will be taking up space for play areas and green space, as we've shown you, but we've tried to minimize the impact as much as possible. But the bottom line is we have taken and will continue taking space for instructional classrooms. Safety and security considerations, even though we'll be putting cameras in, we will be having locked doors on either end, and these larger units are more secure because they only have 2 end doors and swipe cards in a security system. They're still not part of the main building, and we're just being very honest. It's not the same as being inside the main school building, but it's as good as we can make it with the space. There's some inefficiency. We've seen that for years and years now. A lot of foot traffic. We're trying to minimize that by putting bathrooms now and having bathrooms in the units that we're putting in with the short-term plan. But there is lost foot traffic going back into the main building for whatever. I suppose it's a small break for students as well to be able to walk back and forth. Disconnected for staff, disconnected to their colleagues if their classroom is in a different place. One of the good things that we've been able to do with the larger unit at Mabel I. Wilson School is that all of the second grade teachers are in that hallway. All of the second grade students are in that hallway so they can see their friends in between during breaks and whatnot in the hallway. So that has worked out better, but there's still a disconnect to the other areas of the building. Noise from the playgrounds, this certainly has a learning impact even with the main building with windows that are up against a play area, but with modulars, it's a little bit more of an impact, and we've tried to situate these new units in places that will have less impact from play areas, but still we can't completely get rid of that. The classroom walls are not as insulated as in the main building. I think these are a lot of obvious points, but we're just pointing that out. Typically, modular classrooms run a little bit smaller than in the main building. Not always. There are certainly cases where there's classrooms in the main building that are actually smaller than modulars, but generally speaking, that's the case. And that's why we also put, we need to keep our class sizes a little bit smaller in the modular units. Reduced storage space and cabinetry. I think we've done a good job trying to help as much as possible, and we will certainly be putting cabinetry and as much storage space into these modular rooms, but they're not like the main building where those are built in. Maintenance issues are more prevalent over the weekend. We mentioned that there was a cold weather issue with the gas line going out to the modulars. You know, thankfully we got it fixed in time, but when you have modular classrooms and units, you are going to have more of those happening. And then finally, just the sunk costs. Sunk costs meaning, you know, these are leases, just like you would if you have an apartment and you don't own it. Obviously, you're leasing. Just the sheer cost of it, you're not able to turn around and have it as an asset at the end of the day. And there's a lot of money that goes into setting these up, and that's why we want to do it once for the short-term plan and get it done. And so those setup costs don't keep recurring as we've tried to patch together things over the last few years. We want this to be a plan that is there for a number of years. We do it once, we do it right at Mabel I. Wilson School and try to minimize, but there are setup costs, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the actual cost in the budget, these are estimated costs. They're not really estimated. They're pretty close to what they would be for actual, but looking at the phase-in of the cost for being able to complete this plan over the 5 years. For fiscal year 2024, which will be starting the summer of 2023, obviously, for the 2023-24 school year, adding another unit, 12 rooms at the Mabel I. Wilson School, removing the 2 smaller units, moving and rebuilding the playground, and resurfacing the play areas and expanding the fence line, which Scott talked about. All of those things all told, we would be paying $250,000 out of the general fund for the lease, just the straight lease of that unit. And this is additional money for this second unit. We're not talking about the first unit that's already there. We're already paying on that. It would be a 5-year term, and it would be $1.25 million for that particular unit over the full life of that 5-year term. Plus, the capital costs is $1.423 million, and that includes rebuilding the playground, that includes the fence line, resurfacing, all the other things, getting the units there, and setting them up, putting them on concrete pads, et cetera. So that's a one-time cost on the capital block, but you'll see that those two costs go together, and that one-time cost for capital is something we won't have to carry forward. In 2025, for the fiscal year 25, which is the summer of 24, put the Greeley Middle School unit number 1 in and take out the 3 smaller units. Again, it's $250,000 out of the general fund, and that's for 4 years. I'm talking about a 5-year plan. Now we're 1 year in, that's 4 years. That's $1 million over the 4 years. Plus there's $987,000 in estimated setup costs, including getting it there, putting it on concrete pads, moving the small ones out, et cetera. So that would be the cost that would come out of, we're proposing out of capital reserve. And then in 2027, fiscal year 27, again, we talked about that second 10 or 12 room unit at Greeley Middle School. If we need to do that, that would be something we would have to talk about the cost going forward. It all depends on what the board's long-term plan will be. So we put a TBA just as a placeholder, and if we have to discuss it later, we will do that. But the total cost out of the general fund for just leasing of these 2 units, additional money that we will need to take from the general fund over the next 5 years, is $2,250,000. For capital reserves, it will be $2,410,000. So the total cost over the 5 years between the general fund lease and the capital reserves for completing all of the site work and setup costs, transporting the modulars back and forth, et cetera, from the company, will be $4,660,000 for the 5 years. Scott, do you want to add anything else to the financial piece?
No, I think we got it.
Can I ask a question?
Mike, sorry, I didn't know where it was coming from.
Yeah, that's okay. It's very weird, the acoustics. If my memory serves me correct, that we currently pay something like $300,000 a year.
$335,000 a year.
This is going to be on order of like $450 to $475 or so. Just trying to do the math for the leasing part of it, not including the reserve fund. Is that right? Per year?
So the $250,000 is a lease per unit, additional.
Right, and then starting the next year, it'd be an additional $250,000.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so we're looking at by 2025, FY 2025, it's $500K a year.
And these are additional costs, so it doesn't even take into account the $335,000 that we're currently paying on our modulars right now.
This is $500K additional.
Correct.
Oof. And then the capital reserve fund that we had it's like
We have around $5 million,
which we were going to use to soften the for the new building project, the first beginning
That's right.
years. But
we were going to use that money to help stop it, but obviously with the referendum not passing and our immediate needs being very important for the next 5 years, you know, that $5 million needs to be used in a different way. So we will be using obviously $2.4 million of that money over the next 5 years in order to help with these costs. And Scott, I think Scott's gonna, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah. What I would mention is that as the board knows and many of the community knows, we were setting those funds aside to offset the budget as we were taking on additional debt with that stepped and tiered debt service plan. Losing these funds to do this short-term project, we don't have that opportunity to offset that debt service enough. So not having been able to move the project forward will result in using those unallocated fund balances, transferring them to a capital reserve account, and using them to pay for the capital cost affiliated with this short-term plan.
I also just had a question because I thought we were also looking into whether it made more fiscal sense for us just to purchase the units outright versus leasing. So can you tell me how you landed on the decision just to continue leasing?
Yeah, the leasing cost, one, if we purchase the items outright, it'll literally wipe us out of our reserve account, okay, and eliminate our fund balance altogether, and which is a place we don't want to be in. The other thing is, at the end of the day, I'm not so sure that those modulars end up being an asset at the end of the day. We'd have to figure out how to get rid of them. what to do, selling them off, and at that point, the tear down cost may exceed, or the moving cost may exceed the value at the end of the day.
Scott, have you been able to figure out what will the savings be, if any, getting rid of those 4 from Maple Wilson, right? We're losing those 4.
I made that assumption in the numbers that I put up
Okay.
there, is I tried to net those out with any savings from reducing the other modulars.
Okay.
And just so everyone knows, these are brand new units. They're custom built to our specs. They're brand new and they're delivered on site. So it's not as though we're getting a hand-me-down from another district where they're 20 years old and falling apart. We've had to rehab some of the older ones that are on the campus. They haven't been the best of units, so.
And we have to do this just in case in 5 years the new school doesn't pass again. That we need these buildings to be able to be sustainable
They need
longer.
to be able to be sustainable, and quite frankly, we really don't have any other choice going forward because we're out of space.
Yep.
And we need to address that now. So regardless of grade configurations, other questions that are happening, we have no space. And so it's time to move forward and create space. Okay.
So I know that gentleman over here asked what grades would be out at the Mabel I. Wilson School. It's going to be the older grades. We always try to keep the younger students in the main building, and the older students would be out in the modulars is typically how we've looked at it. Oh, Scott has something else you'd like to add?
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I did want to add that one of the disadvantages we've had is we haven't been able to get state subsidy on these temporary spaces because we took immense advantage of that in the past. But since we haven't taken advantage of that in a number of years, today I had a conversation with DOE and the person who handles all the oversight of the funds for these. And I do believe there's a strong possibility that we can get state subsidy on these modulars, but they're always 1 year removed. So we would apply this summer, but yet the subsidy wouldn't come in place until the following year. And so we just put those forward and apply for those. So that's one of the things today, and they do it on basically a certain dollar amount per square foot. So I'm sure we won't get all of it subsidized, and the setup costs are not subsidized, but maybe we can get the leases subsidized to help us out a little bit, existing leases and new ones.
So the next steps, we have a few next steps just to talk about. The board will be asked to vote on this plan in a week, and I will send you this presentation. It was in your packet. Scott and I have been working on it today as well, just to finalize everything, so you will get it tonight. I believe Jason has scheduling a vote for next Monday evening, February 13th, for the board to vote on this. The importance of the vote coming sooner than later is that we have to lock in the modular leases and arrangements with Scavi, the company that we're working with, the contractor, and get everything else in place as well, the setup. There's so many things that go along with this. There has to be a lot of lead time in order for us to be able to make all this work. So that's why we're asking the board to vote sooner than later on this plan. Also, next Monday evening, as you know, there's a workshop to define the process for the board in the long-term major capital plan, looking ahead. What does that referendum or plan look like in developing a new plan for a new school? And finally, Scott and I will be conferring with the town of Cumberland, the planner and the manager, around the updated site plan, finding out what the next steps are. Do we need to go to the planning board? Is this something that can be handled through the planner's office? We'll be doing that in very short order to get that going. Town has always worked very well with us on this, so we don't expect any glitches, but just want to make you aware that is one of our steps that we go through. So that's the short-term facilities plan, and Scott and I are available to answer any questions. Go back to any slides you'd like. And again, we will be sending this presentation tonight to you so that you have it, so you can really look through it.
Will this presentation also be available for the public, possibly on our, what was our news or the referendum website? Can we start kind of building that
Yes.
up a bit?
And it will be in, I forgot to mention this, it will be in this week's newsletter as a link.
Great.
so that people can look at it. It will be proposed at that point because it hasn't been approved. But we'll put that as a proposed plan so people can look at it, and then we'll be also isolating this presentation from tonight and putting that as a link for people to look at.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the board? Okay, I'm happy to open it up to public comment. This is important stuff. If anybody would like to speak, have questions.
We'll hand the podium over so people can come up.
Okay. Seeing, yeah, step up, please, so people could hear you at home.
When you said the walkways would be covered, do you mean covered from the portable to the main building? No. Okay.
No, they have to, just because of some of the rules around how you connect buildings, they have to be 20 feet off of the main buildings. It'll be just the actual ramps, the ADA ramps, and going up. So like, you know, the little L that goes up would be covered, okay?
Can we look at having them covered, at least somewhat, to the buildings so they don't get all wet all the time?
Yeah, we had issue with that when we tried to do that before. I can certainly look into it again, but I can tell you that there's issues with trying to connect them to the building.
I mean, if there's any way the sidewalks join, if they joined at any point to some common door, maybe at that point?
Yeah, we can take a look at it. I can tell you we haven't been successful with it in the past, though.
Okay.
But we can certainly look at it.
Any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Further questions, comments, concerns from the board?
Appreciate the work that was done on this. It's a really difficult situation, right? So appreciate the time, effort put into it.
Yeah, and just a reminder, this short term is now sort of a longer term, short term, because of the failure of the referendum. You know, we would have been doing things differently a little bit this summer and going forward if we knew, if we had a building in sight, sort of. Scott, I would like to understand fully the cost of build, own versus lease, because my only fear is, you know, to Ann's point, is this is 5 years and maybe the numbers look different at the 5-year mark, but if we go, you know, years 6 through 10, if we still have to use these,
Sure.
then we might own them at year 5, but if we're leasing them, that's just more sunk cost. So.
Yeah, I've pursued a conversation with Doten's Construction about stick building them on site and building them in a fashion of a modular that can be taken apart and moved at another time. The other one is I'm waiting for Schiavi to get back to me on what we could purchase one of those outright for. So as soon as I have that information, I'll share it with the board. It's I know that the one that I got just to purchase the unit outright, it was close to $2.4 million to purchase it with stick built on site and the concrete and some of the other things. So.
And we can't amortize that in any way?
We could. I could look at we'd have to look at how we break out some of the costs that are affiliated with the purchase, because I don't have those broken out separately. We could look at amortizing that and doing a rent to own, I believe, through somebody like a Doten's, or I could look at doing a lease purchase option with somebody like Androscoggin Savings. Okay, and looking at doing that by us getting the units and then being able to do that. So, so there may be the opportunity to do that without having to just lease it outright, but be able to pay for it over a period of 5 years and own it at the end of that time. Certainly the payment will be higher and affect our general fund, but that's certainly an option that I can put together.
Mike?
I think it's very reasonable and smart to look at that costing, but I just want to note how skeptical I am of purchasing it. And I mean, this should be seen completely as a short-term step to moving to a referendum within the next few years, and then hopefully moving into a new building in 5-ish years. really we should only be thinking about this. This is the best Band-Aid we can put together right now. And so I understand your questioning, Jason, and I think it's worth looking at the numbers. But when you're like 6 through 10, it just made my stomach turn into a knot. I understand it's reality, but it's awful. And so I think everything should be pointed towards not that, if we can.
Yeah. So we have a finance committee meeting coming up, and I would expect that I should have some numbers by then that I can share with finance and take a look at that.
Okay.
I agree with you, Mike, as well.
Just had to say that.
10 years.
I just
Well,
want
we
to
just
see
don't
the
want to
numbers.
lose. We just don't want to lose
Just
sight
wanna
that
see the
we're a
numbers.
4 district.
That would be money in our pocket
We're a
years
4
5, 6,
school
and 7.
district. Not really.
Oh,
We're
I'm-
a 4 school district.
I'm not in favor of making it any longer than it needs to be. I just want to understand the numbers. Make sure we're doing what we should be. Okay. And the reason I wanted to postpone the vote on this short-term plan was just really to give you guys a week to absorb it. So that'll be at our workshop. There will be one action item on there. And the rest of that workshop is really just defining the process. We won't be getting too far into the weeds next week. Defining the process of what the next few years looks like. Okay. Anything else on that topic before we move on? So, Jeff, Superintendent's report.
Yes, this is a little bit lighter news. Mabel I. Wilson's monthly assemblies focused on Dr. Martin Luther King. Students were reading a book, watching short video about him at each of these assemblies. They are talking about school expectations, school goals, sing and dance together. They actually sing and dance as they're leaving the gym. And you'll see that on these pictures, you'll see students in here. This is half the school in one sitting, just to make sure you understand. We cannot fit all of the students in the gym comfortably or safely otherwise. Middle school and high school students sang in the District 2 Honors Choir over the weekend. Special thanks to our chaperones, Molly and Brian Bairdorfer, Joshua Forrest, and Kelly Lindwish. And we had a number of students involved from the middle school and high school. This is a great event, and enjoyed, I know a lot of people enjoyed seeing that. One day I was walking to the middle school, and I just happened to come across a site of students that were with Daniela Tetro and her PE classes for Mabel I. Wilson's school, and they were snowshoeing and enjoying the winter weather. That was after one of the recent snowfalls. It was just nice and crisp out there and snowy, and the kids were just having a lot of fun learning how to use snowshoes, how to put them on, which takes a long time, and then how to take them off, which probably took a lot more time than actually snowshoeing. Congratulations to high school student Grace Hall for receiving the Silver Key Award for her outstanding artwork in the Maine Region Scholastic Art Awards competition. Her sculpture titled Book Monster will be exhibited both online as well as at the Maine College of Art and Design. Pretty impressive, just unbelievable how she created that. Author Elise Carboni talked virtually with fourth graders about her book Blood on the River, based on the early American colonization, a book used by teachers as part of the social studies and ELA curriculum at GMS 4-5. Senior night was Friday, February 3rd. It was the final home game of the Greeley girls basketball team, recognizing their 4 seniors, Sophia, Addison, Cassidy, Allie, and their families. So congratulations to the girls who are graduating and have contributed so much in the girls basketball program for the last 4 years. Greeley girls basketball team also raised $193 and delivered several boxes of non-perishable food items for the Cumberland Food Pantry. The recreation students, younger students, had ice cream and got autographs from the varsity team members, and that's always a big deal for any of the kids to get autographs from the older students. Ben Caswell's PE classes, his 6th graders in particular, were playing giant ball volleyball in PE class when this photo was snapped. It was snapped before the big Chinese hot air balloon was flying over the United States. We did not call the president for this one. The High School Community Service Club, this is something they do every single winter. They went out and helped those in need in the community, usually senior citizens who are having trouble shoveling their deck or walkways. Students from our high school go out and do that, especially after a large snowfall, which occurred about 2 weeks ago. And Tommy, I know that you've been part of that club, or I'm sure you were doing this.
I couldn't make that one because I had a swim meet, but it's definitely a very fun experience, like of just like high school community involvement.
It's great that the club does that every year and helps out folks in the community who need it. Siri Botto's art classes at the high school, her foundation's art class, have been making monotype printmaking. And you can see photos there that she has taken of students involved in that. A fantastic performance of the State Senate Chamber in Augusta on Saturday, January 28th. High school student and star debater Ruth Weeks secured a spot at the NSDA National Tournament to be held in Phoenix, Arizona in June. Congratulations, Ruth. Really, the debate team is just on a roll. They just keep winning all kinds of awards, and Ruth has certainly been a huge part of that. Past week, the Board of Directors went back to school. Obviously, you all have participated in that by visiting the middle school, 4, 5, and 6, 8. We also have an upcoming board goes back to school tomorrow at the Wilson School, and then our final one at the high school in a few days. Thank you to our allied arts teachers at GMS 4-5 for coordinating an amazing guest speaker experience for students. WMTW meteorologist Sarah Long came and shared her experiences working on Mount Washington, and she also had a trip to the Antarctica when she shared those experiences, and that was actually on Channel 8's news program as well. And I know a lot of people in town have been talking about this in both towns. Impressive and unprecedented win for the boys basketball team about a week ago. I'm sorry, it wasn't a week ago. It was a few days ago. In 8 overtimes over Freiburg. So unbelievable. I think it might just be one of the longest games in Maine history, they say, basketball games. So to go 8 overtimes, I was thinking we should probably be paying the refs twice, not once. Thinking those poor refs are probably like, wait a minute. The Pulsiver Project, in December, some of our dedicated Spanish students helped run a sale called the Pulsiver Project. Sold bracelets and bags that were made by artisans from Nicaragua and Guatemala. The sales helped to create a reliable and sustainable income for the artists and support programs that help their communities. All in all, this effort helps to break the cycle of poverty. Our students raised more than $400 through their sales, and thank you for the support that many people in the community had to make this a big success. I'd like to thank Margaret Corral. Also, she was kind of coordinating this with the students, this project. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, but also there'll be a slide up here, and this report will go out in the newsletter this week. But again, just thanking the facilities and transportation crews for their very hard work over the last week, keeping the district and keeping school in session. Without their hard work, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So thanks again. That's the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Jeff. Mike, please.
Just one quick thing. Just this past Saturday was the District 2 band and orchestra. Mr. Thurston did a great job. If he doesn't have pictures, I have them, and I can send them to you.
That'd be great. Anytime people have pictures, we'd love to throw them up there, put them on social media.
Yeah.
So Mr. Thurston didn't get those pictures to us.
It's okay. He was focused, and he was doing a good job. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. Other questions, comments from the board?
So I just snuck away, and I want to give an explanation for that. And it kind of ties into your report, Jeff. My daughter was doing the national anthem tonight as part of Sounds of Silence, which is run by Robin Sitters. There were a whole bunch of kids there doing signing the national anthem, which is pretty cool, over at the boys basketball game, where they were also celebrating senior night, which was a lot of fun. There were a lot of positive vibes over there.
Great. And I'd just like to say, anytime anybody has a photo and wants to send it to us, we have a Go Rangers email as well for our staff. And we collect photos and events and all those things. And we love to have these things. We try to showcase as much as we can and put things out there. So it's really positive and showing what we can do. We also put a lot of photos on our website, on our main website as well, just displaying. So
very good.
It's awesome.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, moving on to committee reports. Vanessa, Finance.
Finance. The finance team, Tom and Kim and Jason El Ficiato, if I said that correctly.
Ex officio?
Yes. Ex officio. I have to call them out on it every time. And Jeff and Scott, we've been meeting pretty much weekly since the beginning of the year, looking at each building administration's requests. We've been honing them down. We helped with this layout, if we should do it in one phase or two phases according to the budget. Our next meeting is the 17th, which we're still working on fine-tuning a little bit more on those building administration's requests. And then you'll be presenting the budget, proposed budget, on the
mid-March.
Mid-March.
Yeah, I think it's the 19th.
So we still have some time, but the finance team is definitely, we're spending a lot of time together going over this budget.
Okay. Anything for Vanessa without getting into the weeds? Okay. Moving on to policy, Jared, and I'll, the explanation on our second readings, we can hold on that until we get to those items for action. So is there anything else?
Nope, just those items, which we'll talk about next.
Okay. Facilities, Mike.
Not really, almost nothing. You just heard a ton on facilities. I would just say that coming out of the workshop next week, we should gather fairly soon afterwards to start to absorb that and move to figure out what's moving forward.
I think Leanne had asked the question about facilities, and I think a lot of what's been happening recently was finance in front of facilities, basically. What can we fund?
And the short-term facilities plan.
Yep.
I mean, that's the most pressing thing at this point, at least in my opinion. And
certainly is, yes. Okay, moving on to curriculum.
No updates since the last time. We're scheduled to meet next Monday. Agenda TBD.
Okay, thank you. Equity, Jared.
Similar note, no updates since our last board meeting. Our next meeting will be a week from tomorrow, actually, on the 14th. Agenda to be determined.
Okay, very good. Student reports, please.
Sure. Yeah, so the big one I have to talk about is senior nights for sports. I know several of them have happened. Tonight is the boys basketball senior night. Just celebrating kids who have, been in the district, and it's their last year playing sports, and kind of paying homage to that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Avery. Tommy?
One thing that isn't going on for Avery or the seniors, but for the rest of the kind of underclassmen, is course selections for next year and choosing the courses that we want to be taking. For a lot of the IB students, it's not really necessary because all of the courses are 2 years anyway, so you're kind of locked in the second you request it in junior year. But as far as that, it's definitely an exciting time about just with what comes with it, about talking with your teachers about what you want to take, what you're interested in. So that's definitely a big thing that's happening at the high school right now. And then similar to Avery, a lot of the sports teams are heading into the postseason, and just school spirit in the school is very present. You might have noticed my haircut. It's not by choice, but rather for the swim team, and soon I will be bald. So brace yourselves.
Easy now, easy.
Yeah. It's a really great time of year, especially with all of the school spirit, and yeah, I'm excited for the postseason. Be watching some basketball and maybe hockey, and also to be swimming at the state meet myself. So yeah.
Excellent, congratulations. Questions for the students? Okay, thank you guys. All right, moving on. Any other ad hoc committee stuff?
Committee assignments.
Say again?
We need committee assignments, Mr. Chair, for the Environment Committee.
Yep, there's an email outstanding. I'm waiting for a response. Yep. It's tentatively you and Christina. Peter Scott said that he would do it. Arlene Sagan wrote me and wants to do it. She's heads up one of the environmental teams. And then the question will be students. So I've asked Peter and Arlene about their recommendations. That's right, Avery is on it,
I remembered.
last but not least. And there will be other students as well. Kim, please.
I just remembered that I wanted to add that the PTO is putting on a parent university next Wednesday, the 15th. They are screening the movie The Upstanders, how kids can move from being a bystander to an upstander. And there will be some discussion afterwards. It'll be in this room on Wednesday. And so just a continued shout out to the PTO who does such a great job putting out these events. And I hope that people take advantage of it and come. The movie itself will be available online as well, but to watch it in person and have that conversation afterwards, I think it's going to be a great opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. I plan to attend that. Thank you. In general, things like that, Jeff, can we put an item like that on the high school shared calendar? Like, you know, on our website, we have a calendar for every single building, and then we have a GCA calendar. And I really want people, because you can sync to that calendar.
And a Mabel I. Wilson calendar.
Yeah, every building has their own, yep, plus the GCA. And so, like, I would love people to be able to sync to that and see, like, that is happening. And they didn't know what was going on, but I'm not doing anything, and so they show up.
We've done a lot of calendar talks over the last year or so about how to sync our calendars more. But so basically having events that occur throughout the district, having them populate on different school calendars is what you're saying.
So I'm talking about the 5 that people can sync to. On our website, you can go and you can select MIW, and then there's a subscribe button.
Yep.
So it's a public calendar, and sometimes stuff makes it on there, but it doesn't. Like, it doesn't seem to be maintained. Mm-hmm. And then, like, I would think varsity sports should be on the high school calendar. Like,
oh, I don't. Like, I link into those calendars just for the important, like, half day teachers, but to have that on my Google Calendar, to have all basketball, swimming, all those events would just be.
I'm thinking
like
in terms of
blow up.
community. Like, people want to come to these things that they don't know about.
Maybe a community, like you could go on the website and link community, and it will have the listings of the basketball and the games.
Trying to encourage people to come to our stuff. That's what I want.
I think you could both be arguing for the same thing, but just with the layers of volunteering
Yes.
for said calendar, so as
Yes.
not to get 75 things every day. Because, you know, for a community calendar, I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea, actually. And so you can just hop on and see, like, what's happening this week, you know, not just varsity
So you
sports, but,
subscribe to a
you know, band
community
concerts,
calendar.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can also, if you're like, I do not want that on my calendar's already a mess. Maybe I'm speaking from personal experience or not. To have, like, just the very core important things. I don't know. There's levels. I don't know. That makes sense to me. But I agree that we should have something out there so it's easy to find.
Regardless, we're not using them enough, particularly with the GCA. Like, I'd like to fill that place up more and allow people from the general community to be able to know about it. what's going on at GCA tonight. And they might not even have kids in the district, but be a nice event to go to, something like that.
Yeah, another area that we've talked about and we'd like to move on at some point is using our YouTube channels in a different way so that we're putting that information out there so that members of the community, anybody that's in the community can actually log on to our YouTube channel, and we basically have all kinds of events going that they can watch. Plus calendaring, here's upcoming events and things like that, and go there. So that's something that we've been talking about. Actually, been talking about it with a couple people at the district office that would be working on that. So we're going to have a meeting about that.
Make it easier for people to engage. Melissa will hate me for this too, but I was looking at a way in our videos so you can link directly to, you can jump to a spot in the video. And I was thinking like in our minutes or below in the description of the YouTube video, like it could be like agenda item X starts here and you can just click and jump right to it because we want the community to be engaged, but like a 3 or 4 hour meeting is a lot, but you could jump to.
Yep.
It's so exciting though. I don't.
Oh, I hear you.
It's every minute is riveting.
I think we should get Scott in front of a whiteboard to do budget explainers and put that on YouTube.
Look at the 100 people
Done
that
it
are
before.
here tonight.
It's all screen now. It's not even whiteboard.
Okay. Anything else for ad hoc? Okay. Communications. Anything for that before we move to items for action? Okay. Moving on. So do I hear a motion for the first one, and then we'll have Jeff or Scott take us through that?
I'll move that the resolution entitled Resolution to Authorize Lease Purchase of the Plow Truck with Spreader and Other Accessories and Equipment in the principal amount of up to $80,267 be adopted in form presented to this meeting.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Who was it? Jared, thank you. All right. I know we did one of these similar, but you want to?
We did, yeah. We've done a school bus one, and it's pretty common in the district. What we do is we end up buying items outright, and then what we do is hold before we enter into a lease purchase until we see where we're going to end the fiscal year at, because we may not have to enter into that lease purchase and pay interest over a 3-year period or 4-year period. But this gives us the option to be able to do that, and the board has to vote on it within 60 days of us actually paying for it in order to qualify to be able to do this, basically a reimbursement through a lease down the road as we get further down towards the end of the fiscal year. It's a financial tool that we use many times in terms of not wanting to have to enter into a lease purchase unless we have to. This is a budgeted item. It was budgeted as a lease purchase, so that's where we're at.
Okay. And that explanation will be the same on the next item.
It's the same for the next item as well.
But it gives us the ability to take back that capital, if you will, if we need it. Right?
Exactly. Reimburse us for the full expenditure if we need to, and then pay for it over a period of 3 to 5 years. And we try not to do that unless we have to. We try to use fund balance at the end of the year to pay those leases.
So, question, this is additional to the other plows we have or whatever?
Yes, this is another vehicle. Yes.
So where are we going to park it? I mean, I know space is kind of tight.
Yeah. We did get rid of one of the vehicles that we had, one of the trucks. The frame was completely rotted on it and the sander was gone, so we actually got rid of that vehicle. Parking is tight. If you look up to the facilities building, we are able to park it there at this time.
Checking, thank you.
Okay, no, it's a good question.
Other questions, thoughts, concerns? Okay, all in favor? And unanimous, motion carries, thank you. All right, do we hear a motion for the next one, 9B?
I'll move that the resolution entitled Resolution to Authorize Lease Purchase of Photocopiers and Printers with Related Accessories and Equipment in the principal amount of up to $53,900.01 be adopted in form presented at this meeting.
Thank you, Mike.
Second.
Who was that? Thank you, Christina. All right. Similar explanation. Other questions, comments, concerns? Avery?
How much do photocopiers cost?
$53,900 dollars and
Depends
1
on
cent.
depends on what they are. They can range anywhere from 4,000 to 12,000, depending on what you buy.
So this
That's
is a
not
lot
even the
of
paper.
photocopiers.
Yeah, and we remember one of the things we do here in the district is we don't just put all our photocopiers in a little room and everybody goes in and photocopies. We're on a print management system where we've basically eliminated the majority of the standalone printers that are more expensive to print off than it is to print directly to the photocopier, and then everybody's able to take their swipe card, walk to the photocopier, scan it, and get the item securely off the photocopier. It's what we call paper cut, and it's a managed print system. Saves a lot of money over the years when they're working properly.
And where will this printer?
It's a number of them, and
It's
they're
fun.
spread across the district. What we do is we look at
So this isn't just one.
No, that's not one, no, it's a number. And it's
Very
basically
smart.
they're inventoried across the district, and what we look at is as some are aging, we replace them with newer, and we go through this process. We've had a little bit of problem with the paper cut system, and hopefully we're gonna start ironing that out. We need to upgrade our software next year and get that to work a little bit better than it does now.
When we're replacing units, how do we dispose of the old printers? and
They're given
copiers?
back to the photocopier company, so such as BEU, they take the old ones and then they recycle them, take parts off of them to fix older copiers that are around wherever they have a need for them. So they take them and dispose of them.
Good question, Avery. $53,000 photocopier would seem like a lot, wouldn't it?
1 cent.
And 1 cent. All right, other concerns, questions? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous, motion carries, thank you. All right, so we're getting into a bunch of policies here. Is there a motion for 9C?
I motion to approve policy JLG, Education of Homeless Children and Youth as presented.
Thank you, Vanessa. Is there a second?
Second.
Mike, thank you. All right, these next three are related. Jared, do you want to explain these? These are fairly straightforward, I think.
Sure. So this is a second reading of policy JLG, Education of Homeless Children and Youth, and policy JLG-R, Homeless Children and Youth Administrative Procedure. If these are, I guess, approved or adopted, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but if that happened, then they would replace in its entirety existing policy JFABD, Admission of Homeless Students. And our understanding is that all of these changes, essentially JLG and JLG-R, were newly drafted policies by our counsel, Drummond Woodsum, responding to changes in the law. And again, if adopted, they would replace our existing policy.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Concerns, questions on these ones? Mike?
Just wanted to note that the policy committee reviewed these with Peter Scott, who runs the work with children who are experiencing homelessness in the district, and so it was a full, thorough review. And there were no questions. It's very well done.
Peter Scott is the designated liaison pursuant to the existing policy and the proposed new policies.
I just had a question about JLGR. We would remove, though, the Drummond note before it was published to the policy guide, right? Like,
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thought that was just for internal.
I think that's right, Ann.
Yes, that would be removed. We'll make sure that.
Other questions, concerns before we vote? All right, so this first vote is just on JLG. All in favor? Unanimous, motion carries, thank you. Is there a motion for the next one, 9D?
A motion to approve policy JLG- I forgot my glasses at home, so I'm just helping people out. Homeless children in youth administrative procedures as presented.
Thank you, Vanessa. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. All right, anything else further? All right, so we're voting this time on JLG-R. All in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. And the next one, 9E.
I move to remove policy JFABD, admission of homeless students, as presented.
Thank you, Kim. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vanessa. Discussion? All in favor of deleting JFABD? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. All right, is there a motion for the next one, 9F?
To approve policy IJJ, selection of education materials as presented.
Thank you, Vanessa. Is there a second?
Second.
Jared, thank you. Jared, will you take us through this for people that weren't here last time?
Sure. I think I'll take some pains to go back through some of the background that I explained last time again, because I don't know if everyone was here last time, and then also to address some of the questions that have come in since the first reading. So we don't have Heather with us tonight, but I asked as background what was the initial impetus for the changes to IJJ, and essentially there were two elements of the existing policy on selection of education materials that they wanted to address. At the time that they first, when I say they, I mean the school librarians, when they first wanted to address this policy, there were a number of books in other jurisdictions that were being challenged, and sometimes it wasn't just by parents of the community or members of the community, but people from outside the community who might be challenging a specific book that was included among educational materials. So the librarians wanted to propose an edit that would say that if anyone wanted to challenge an existing an educational material in our district, they would have to be a resident member of the community, that they would have to live here. Secondly, if a educational material is challenged, then there is a procedure that's spelled out in IJJ for how to review whether or not the material should in fact remain, or if access should be restricted. And as part of that, a committee is appointed to review the materials, and the librarians had asked whether or not those committee members could be anonymous, and unfortunately Drummond Woodsum indicated that would not hold, and so that change did not get made. At the same time that they were calling for those two updates, they took the opportunity to compare IJJ against similar policies for selection of education materials from other surrounding districts, and they took the best of what was out there. They generally updated IJJ, and as you're looking through the markup here, virtually all of the edits in red and in blue, and then there's one edit in kind of lighter green, which is in F4. All of those edits came last year, and that was based on initial input from the librarians, followed by comments from Drummond Woodsum, and then some comments from our policy committee last year. This year, in picking this up, because policy did not make it through committee, we ran out of time essentially at the end of the school year last year. There were two additional changes made by the policy committee this year. The first is in section C, the selection procedure. The committee initially had proposed language to say, well, suppose that there's materials where it's not sure or unclear whether or not the material was appropriate for a certain age range or the particular school building and for which it's being proposed. Should there be a policy in here that says that the librarians or the teacher should review with their administrator the materials? Drummond Woodsum thought that any attempt to try to specify in advance what materials should be reviewed would be too difficult to specify in a policy, and so they struck our proposed language that was in green there, but they proposed their own language, which is in pink. It's in the second paragraph of section C, in which they said that the existing language said, before selecting or recommending materials for purchase, professional staff should evaluate the existing collection, consult with staff from appropriate departments and or grade levels. And then Drummond Woodson proposed adding the sentence, including but not necessarily limited to their building principals and the superintendent as necessary. And then it continued with the existing language, personally reviewed the material and obtained recommendations, reviews regarding the material from appropriate reputable sources. Secondly, in section E, inspection of materials by parents and opt-out requests, the committee proposed adding new language which basically would have the policy enshrine the existing practice that the schools' libraries have, which is that they have posted a catalog of their libraries on each school's website so that students or parents can review what books are available in the library. It's actually very, very well done. And we added a sentence that said the website for each school will include a link to the school's library where parents and students can search the library's contents by categories, including title, author, topic, and keyword. For the board's knowledge, initially Drummond Woodson asked why that was necessary given that this is already an existing practice. And they said typically this type of language might be more appropriately found in a rule or in the handbook. We ultimately decided that this should be, in fact, a policy for two reasons. One is that in case future librarians did not think it was worth the upkeep to those online catalogs, we thought that actually that this is something that should be maintained. It was actually a great tool and a great resource. Secondly, this whole paragraph is about inspection of materials by parents and opt-out requests in case parents felt that any particular materials were not appropriate for their kids. And we just thought as a policy matter, it'd be much better for parents to be inspecting materials remotely online as opposed to actually coming into the school to do it. And so we ultimately decided to keep that sentence in as a proposed change. So that's a summary of kind of how we got here and the edits that we're looking at. I'll address two other questions that came up since the first reading. A few people asked the question of, is there anything about the changes that's designed to in any way restrict the breadth of material that is included in the libraries? And I can answer, I believe, on behalf of the librarians that there was certainly no interest in doing that in any of these changes. In fact, the only tangible change that would speak to that is in section B, criteria for selection. We have added a new section F, which says that instructional and library media materials selected should, and then under F, provide a representation of the contributions of diverse groups and individuals to our American and global heritage. So that provision is not currently in the policy. Secondly, for section K, represent significant authors, composers, and works, and then they propose to add from diverse groups. So those are two incremental changes that are recommended here, which are designed to actually broaden the perspective of materials that are included as educational materials. Secondly, a question was raised about, is there anything else in these changes that's designed to be restrictive in any way or more restrictive than our current policy about selecting educational materials? I think it's worth pointing out to the board that there is existing section BD, which says instructional and library media materials selected should, D, take into consideration the varied interests, abilities, and maturity levels of the students served. That is an existing provision with no proposed edits to it, and it's hard to imagine that in a policy about selecting materials that there wouldn't be some provision that says that any materials selected should reflect the maturity levels of the students served. I will say that not everyone will agree with every decision about what material is appropriate for what age group, but I think those decisions really go beyond the province of the policy committee. That would speak to application and not to the proposed changes themselves. So please excuse my long-windedness, but that's our background and what I know about the proposed changes for the policy.
Thank you, Jared. Christina, please.
2 questions. Under section F, the procedure for challenged materials, am I correct in understanding item 6 is crossed out because in the first paragraph of F, it now says, if I can find it, no changes in access to or removal of educational materials will be made until the procedure is completed. Is that why 6 was crossed out? That virtually says the same thing?
Yes, that's from last year, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And second question, just to confirm, if it's green and it's crossed out, it's gone, right?
Anything that's crossed out is gone.
Thank you. Just making
That big
sure.
section was a first attempt, which got replaced by the one line in C under selection procedure. Yep.
Yeah, great.
Others? Tom?
So I like the additions of F and the change to K to ensure greater representation in our library collections.
This is under B.
Yes, under B, yeah. But what mechanisms do we have in place to make sure that we have representation in our collections?
Jeff?
Well, I have to say the librarians themselves are actually probably the best resource for this because they belong to the main libraries network. My main libraries association, and actually one of our librarians, Heather Perkinson, is the president of that organization. And they confer, the 3 librarians confer together in the district on those things, but they also confer with their organization on recommended book titles. There's also the main book award program, which is kind of new releases, and there's recommendations on grade levels. So the librarians are consulting those on a frequent basis. But it's not just our libraries, it's obviously our classrooms, our teams, our grade levels. Teachers consult with each other on materials. There's a lot of time they're using the same materials. At a grade level, they might use the same book, so they'll buy multiple copies of that book. At the high school, there's some standard books that are part of the curriculum that the department has decided these are the standard books for students to read, and they update those listings as well. So that's generally speaking how it's done. It's very teacher-driven and library and media specialists driven. Occasionally there'll be questions that come up from a parent or someone in the community, and that would be part of the principal. They'll address it with the person involved, the teacher or librarian, and then sometimes the principal might be involved in that discussion. We've had 2 or 3 of those recently that I can think of, and then it gets resolved from there. So,
may I ask, just putting this policy into action, there are a couple steps that I'm slightly confused about. So you as superintendent under section A, responsibility for selection of materials, you are responsible for developing any administrative procedures necessary to guide the review. And does that mean that you, Jeff, put together, or you designate who in each building is responsible besides the librarian? Like, what does that mean that you're developing the administrative procedures?
So quite frankly, everything is under the superintendent. Every policy. I'm not
You're a busy guy.
I'm not really actively involved in this. We have other people that are actively involved. So we have one of our administrators meets with the librarians, for example, but it's more as a coordination effort. It's not to direct the work of the librarians. It's to work with the librarians And just making sure that there's time for them to consult with each other and have a connection to the district. So one of our administrators heads that up. We have administrators that head up every job alike group in our district. So all the PE teachers have an administrator, all the art teachers have an administrator. So that's the purpose of that.
Okay.
Other than that, it's the principals delegate that to their teachers.
Okay.
And whether it's a department at the high school, if it's a team at the middle school, there is coordination of certain books that are curriculum-based books, but those are usually handled by teaching teams, and they are delegated by the principal to those teams. We also have literacy specialists, we have math specialists in our district, and those folks are involved in materials and books that relate to those subject areas.
Okay.
So our librarians consult with teachers. That's actually a big part of their job.
Okay.
They'll talk to teachers about, what books will be a good connector to the curriculum. They'll offer something to teachers individually and through teams.
Okay.
And then they're a resource for students to come down and have individual books. So all of that is really, quite honestly, delegated out.
Okay.
And really the teachers and the library media specialists in our district are the ones that are making those decisions on a regular basis with specialists like literacy and math and et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
That's generally how we do it here.
So let's say I, as a parent, and to Tom's point, I do a overview online of the library, and I recognize that there's a gap, and I know of a book that would fit great into this gap. So I bring it to the principal, to the librarian. Like, what's my first step as a parent to say?
As a parent to say there's something that you'd like to have included in the library. So generally speaking, there's two different places that we look. One is this policy, which is really the teacher and the library media specialist looking at those requests and seeing if they fit into a collection or the gap that the parent is bringing forward. Then there's something which is called a gift. We have a gift policy, which Scott oversees that. Any donations to the district, he clears those things through, make sure that they're appropriate for the district. But if we're talking about making a recommendation because maybe there's a collection that's, or some books for a collection that are not in one of our libraries, that would be a librarian. That would be the person the parent would go to.
Okay, so when it says under C, selection procedure, it's so the professional staff, so that would be the librarian?
Yep.
Would evaluate the existing collection, consult with staff from the appropriate departments and or grade levels, including, but not limited to, the principal and you.
Right. It doesn't mean that we have to be I certainly wouldn't be consulting on a particular book.
Okay.
That would just be including if the principal was going to be involved in that. But on a general basis, the principal is not involved. Okay. Principals are not involved in the selection of books. It's usually when there is an issue that comes up or comes forward, or a parent concern or a student concern, that one of the administrators in the building might be involved.
Okay.
If the staff member brings it to that person.
Okay. And then one last question. As far as the under criteria for selection, I've just been kind of in my head comparing these to our portrait of a graduate, which is such a valuable tool. And I'm just wondering if that was considered as these were looked at, these different criteria. Was that kind of a lens that was gone through?
Yeah, it definitely can be, because you mean the criteria, if it fits into what we could be doing with portrait of a graduate,
right,
at some point,
right? I feel like this criteria for selection should match our portrait of a graduate. That
yes,
these books should be factored into that.
Right, and the portrait of the graduate is basically the skills that, we haven't really gotten into that yet, but we'd like to get into that. The skills that we want all of our students to be leaving with.
Right.
When they graduate, kind of non-negotiable, lifelong, portable skills that every student can't leave our high school without those. But I would definitely think that, all these kinds of policies that we have are going to be really important for a portrait of graduate, so a student is prepared when they leave. And I think that speaks to some of the things that were added to this policy around capacity for critical analysis, making sure that there's representation of diverse groups and individuals, to our American and global heritage, making sure that students understand if something is accurate or not. In the case of nonfiction, that's becoming a huge skill set. There's so much information out there now. It's more parsing through it and figuring out what do you think is true and what do you think is not true, and that's a skill unto itself. So I definitely think a lot of these things play into the whole idea of skill sets around Portrait of a Graduate. The Portrait of a Graduate is kind of those larger skills that we expect for students to be able to graduate with.
All right, thank you for answering all that.
On BL, there's just an extra and hanging out there. It just didn't get deleted.
Oh, I think it goes into M. I think it goes into M and M.
Because it's the last one, maybe.
Oh, okay.
We just put it there just to
That's
show
why
that
the
it's
semicolon is
Grammar
before
police
the
have arrived.
Yes, just hanging there.
Yeah, there's an M.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to make one point, just for the record, just so the general public understands, and I think you all understand, but to be certified, certainly librarians, but teachers have extensive training. There are whole courses you have to take on choosing books and your curriculum and what's appropriate. So I just want to put that out there so everybody understands that's what's going on. That teachers are hired and they are certified and they know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
So you're in good hands. I mean, certainly Jeff pointed out the administrators are trained in this, and librarians certainly are, but teachers are too.
Absolutely, and that's why in our district, curriculum is really, it starts with the teacher groups, and teachers consult with each other. So, first grade team, they're consulting with each other. Oh, what books do you have in your classroom collection? Going to the library specialist, can you help me with some more books that we could use? I want to teach this, we're teaching this, and how can you help us? And all of our teams and grade levels meet with one another, and this is something that they regularly do. One example, Mabel I. Wilson School, I think it was 2 years ago, they had some educators, and I'm trying to remember if it was Colby College or Bates College, I can't remember which one, came in and worked with all the faculty in the school around selecting books and selecting books for diverse learners and diverse learning styles. So that was a very important training that we were able to provide. That was a day-long training. So, yes. And so it's not, it's the certification and then it's the continuous training that we're providing. And I think it's safe to say that, our teachers don't work in a vacuum. They work with each other. And that's why the early releases are so important. I know I've been asked that 100 times since I've been here. Why do we have early releases? Our teachers have to be able to work together to provide quality instruction and materials for students in learning. It's not enough time, but it's better than not having it. So, absolutely.
Mike?
So just, if I could just say just a couple things, because I feel like I've been with this policy for, Vanessa, 24 months.
It's been out there a long time.
So it's spanned 2 chairs of our committee. But the whole time going through it was working hand in hand with the librarians. And that was really important, just to have that perspective and to make sure that this is representative and honors the expertise and the work, as Christina so artfully mentioned, of the people who will actually be doing the selecting of materials. And so to make sure that this is structured in a way that those folks feel empowered and supported through policy, but not in too heavy-handed or prescriptive a manner. And so I think this is a good result. There's just to put it out there, I mean, like, this is coming at a time of strife around this exact topic around books. But the thing is, I could say that and a lot of times in our history. So, but we're in another one right now, and it's not a good thing, in my opinion. I think the push to eradicate books from any library or any source of knowledge or place of knowledge is a bad thing. And so I think this this holds enough from multiple places and makes it so that we can have a truly representative library across grade levels and across our whole school community, taking into account the deep pressures. And I think it's something where I would encourage parents, if you don't think that that was a great question, Kim. If you notice gaps, how can you wade in? I was on the board of Foundation 51 before I was on this board, and every other grant cycle, we gave grants to the school to provide significant parts of libraries. The last two, I think, were on building out racial equity libraries at different grade levels, and so it's a really important thing. And so I think there's from that experience, there was real deep interest in building out those libraries and making sure that there's broad representation and rich learning across multiple viewpoints and experiences. So this is obviously gives people have heartburn over this, and I think that's something where we should stay vigilant and push back against any types of censorship. That's my personal opinion. But also the point of this is truly to empower and support the experts in our schools. So I think this came to a good result. I just want to appreciate Vanessa, Ann, and Jared, who worked on this thing for a couple decades at this point.
And those who came before us.
Others? Ann?
Yeah, I support policy IJJ. I do just want to make sure that, like how I noted during the first read, that the equity plan includes a library audit so that we are aware of any gaps that may be present in any of our libraries. And I think, at Mabel I. Wilson in particular, we have to just be a little more thoughtful, given they are our youngest learners. So is it something that perhaps families may not approve of an item because they don't approve of it in general, or because it truly isn't age appropriate, particularly like thinking about books representing LGBTQ characters, since that is an umbrella, and I don't want to see our families who are queer and have a different composition than what is kind of the traditional expected heteronormative couple, that I don't want those families to feel that they also aren't welcome in our community.
I agree, Ann.
Completely agree.
I don't see anything in this policy that makes things more restrictive, myself personally. Others? Tom?
I completely agree with Ann too, and I can't put it any better than that. And I appreciate, Jeff, all that you described and how, like, the different avenues for improving our collections. And you gave a lot of detail there, and I appreciate that. I don't see any of that, though, in the selection procedure text of this policy. And I mean, we have a lot in here of like what people need to go through to get stuff removed from our library. But aside from the standard procedures of our librarians recommending materials, there are a lot of things that you described that are not reflected in that selection procedure, whether it's from the broader community or from Foundation 51 or whatever it may be. I'm just putting out there, is that something that we need to have or should have in the policy?
So, Tom, do you mean like if Foundation 51 wanted to donate books or money, usually it's money, but to the library?
I think it just goes back to that idea of, if we do see a gap in the in representation, or in what, it doesn't even have to be representation. It could be topic based. in our library materials. What mechanisms are there in place in order to help address that go beyond what our librarians are recommending?
Right. So I think some of you might be familiar with the Daphne Sprague collection at the middle school.
Yep.
There is a collection of books. Daphne Sprague was an ed tech who worked for 30 years in our district, and she passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, but she was a huge proponent of diversity in books. She loved books. She was an avid reader herself. She ran clubs for 4th and 5th graders, book clubs, etc., and for teachers as well at the school. And so when she passed away, a group of staff members and parents who knew Daphne got together and donations were raised. And there is now a collection of books representing more diversity at the middle school library. In fact, there was a Read Around America Day last week where a lot of guest speakers came in and used a book from the Daphne Sprague library collection. I actually read a book to one of the classes over there from that collection. And so that's kind of, sometimes it's organic. You know, there's a need. People know there's a need. You know, hopefully it doesn't take somebody's passing to see that gap. But in this case is an example of where that happened. So I think some of it's organic. I think our library media specialists are really well-versed in that. They are very current on what are the most current books that have come out and what are the topics, and do they have enough of those books in their collection, or do they need to start building those collections up? And one of the things that I also think that we need to do is probably put more money into books in our libraries, period. We did go through a couple of years where we had to reduce a lot of materials and books in order to offset some of our budget increases. And we're trying to build those back up again. So there hasn't, I mean, books are expensive in having that money. But I don't know if I'm answering your question, Tom. Some of it's organic, some of it is the librarians. The three of them consult each other frequently, even though they're at different grade levels. They work together on that. And then they work, again, off of lists that are current lists and current topics in education, and make sure that they've got books that are representing those areas. They also discard books that are have been around for decades and may not be applicable or relevant anymore. I think, you know, we see that the most probably at the high school level where that happens, weeding out some of the books that really don't need to be on our shelves anymore.
I just want to jump in because I think the way you phrase the question at the end is really important, but I think it's separate from the policy question. So that how do we approach, you know, adding to our collections? I mean, that's a good question, but I don't think because Vanessa did too, we push back pretty hard about any prescriptions on book selection. It truly is about leaving it to the expertise of the librarians and the educators, and instead making it very prescriptive and a very high bar to remove books. But selecting books, in my opinion, it should be very easy to add books to our collection, and it should be exceedingly hard to pull them out. So that's, at least from my perspective, just if we're talking about the policy. But the mechanisms for how do we add books, I think that's a different discussion, but a really important one.
Okay. Can I just add one more thing? There is a slight distinction between library collections and then how we use books in the general curriculum as well. Right. And I think the library collections, I don't think we really have, I mean, that's an easy selection process. That's left to the librarians. They make those choices. They purchase those books. Though they go into the collection, they usually consult with teachers, classroom teachers, on that and say, are we missing some books in this particular curricular area? Do you want me to, you know, they put these surveys out at least once a year asking teachers those questions. When it comes to curriculum materials, we do occasionally get parents that are concerned about a book that maybe a team is using, and it might be a new current book that hasn't been used before, and we'll get questions about that. If those questions come up, it always goes to the team that is using the book. If those questions aren't resolved and the parent still wants to go further, they usually go to the administration. So if there's something in the general curriculum, that's usually where we see an administrator getting involved in those, if there's a question mark about a material or a book. Library collections, you know, that's something, we have a distinct process about that. when you have books in classrooms or multiple copies of books, it really does follow the same process, but for some reason, there seems to be more concerns about sometimes those books that are used, because those books are traded out sometimes for other books. You know, there might be, might go several years where all sophomores are reading a particular book, and then all of a sudden that book is not there, and there's a new book that's replacing it, and there'll be questions. We had that a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now at the high school, about a particular book that came online. The department, English department, decided to move away from one book and move to a different book. And we had some questions up front, but those were worked through. That was the end of it. But I think that's more the case. I think library collections, there's almost, you know, it's pretty cut and dry. I mean, it's like add books, and then if there's ever a challenge, you follow this process. With general curriculum books and materials, sometimes there's a little bit more gray area there. And it's, you know, it's just part of the iteration, but we've not removed any materials or books since I've been here in that area. We might have used a book or material in a different way. Instead of using it as a general curriculum material or book, we might use it with students who really need that book or material access to that. For example, a guidance material or something that guidance counselor use. But it really depends on, these are conversations between teachers, counselors, professionals, whatever, to figure out what is the best method. There's no one way of doing it.
I guess I would say I agree with that and what Mike said. And as far as if a parent wants to add a book or sees a hole or knows of a good book, an alternative, I would hope there'd be a culture here of they would mention it to the teacher or the librarian, and then that person would go through the process of making sure that follows the guidelines that they've set. So I would hope that is the culture here, that any parent would feel they could say, hey, what about this book? Or I read this book when I was that age, or whatever.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of that, but when we the instances I know of, I'm sure it happens more than I know about. The librarian or the teacher goes back to the criteria for selection.
Exactly, yeah.
And they're the ones that we defer to on.
So a parent could suggest at any time.
Oh, yeah.
There's no prohibitiveness, and I don't think we need to put that in policy, like, hey, you can suggest a book anytime.
But it's not automatic. It has to go through the selection.
Right, it's not automatically accepted.
It has to be looked at by the teacher, the librarian, whoever it is, in that particular area to make sure it fits the selection.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you all. Anything else? Questions, comments, concerns?
I'll just add that if I would encourage everyone to go to the MSAD site, and then under schools, we've got the 4 schools listed. And if you go to either of the middle schools, and then click on students and go to the Library Media Center, it takes you up to Destiny Discover. And if you click on collections, it has the whole Daphne Sprague diversity collection together in one place. And it's quite a collection. So anyway, it's worth looking through for anyone who wants to see how this policy has been manifesting itself in fact. I think it's good to go right to the source.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jared. Okay, so we are voting on the implementation of this last version of IJJ. All in favor? All opposed? It's unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to 9G. Do I hear a motion?
Just to note that I'm sending an email to Heather right now just to let her know that that's gone through.
We should invite her to our next 6 meetings anyway, Jared. She'll miss us.
Great, thank you.
G, to approve the appointment of professional positions as outlined.
Thank you, Vanessa.
GHS occupational therapist.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Christina. All right, Jeff, please.
So this position is actually replacing an occupational therapist at the high school, working in our functional life skills programs. We have 2 programs up there. We had a resignation of a staff member, so this position is a replacement position, but it is one of the 9 positions that the board has approved in moving towards that clinical wraparound model that Julia Olson had put forward. and helping with our program, all of our special education programs, functional life skills and behavior. So this is just a replacement position of one of those 9 positions.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions? Mike?
I share a last name with this person, but I do not know them, and I'm not related. Just FYI, my name is annoyingly common.
Others? Okay. All in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you.
I know.
Okay.
Oh, it's been a long day.
So, item 9H. Do I hear a motion?
To enter executive session to conduct the evaluation of the superintendent of schools and discuss superintendent's goals pursuant to state statute 1 MRSA 4056A.
Thank you, Vanessa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who was that, Kim? Thank you. All right. All in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Jeff, the votes that we have after coming back, there's really no discussion on those, is that right? Or
We
there-
just don't have
because
a
any
meeting set up
discussion
for
would be
the
an executive
13th.
session.
I don't think she sent it out.
So you guys, I don't think you need to hang around, and we'll just record the vote in the minutes, so shut off the mics, and thank you.
You have the motion and the second on this one.